Coming up on Bridge City News, reactions to a newly formed group in Lethbridge deciding to take matters into their own hands last night, setting up a makeshift overdose prevention tent at Galt Gardens. The U of L held its first ever virtual open house today. We hear from the student recruitment officer on how it went. And a new survey of people in Alberta shows that the pandemic is taking a mental toll in our province.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thank you for joining us. An unsanctioned drug injection site opened in our city Friday night. Set up just 3 weeks after the province pulled funding for arches. The pop-up site is being run by the newly formed Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society.
The well-being and safety of citizens of Lethbridge has always been the priority for our government. This illegal site contravenes the Criminal Code of Canada, and we expect the City of Lethbridge and the Lethbridge Police Service to enforce the law. We would urge you to refer your questions to the Mayor of Lethbridge for matters that pertain to local law enforcement.
With my affiliation with the Lethbridge Citizens Alliance, we worked tirelessly to get awareness of the safe consumption site and the detriment that it was causing to the citizens of Lethbridge and our community in general. And we finally got some action taken. We had the board come down, they listened to us intently. They took that information back to Edmonton. They adjudicated the situation and they determined that, it was not on the up and up, and it was causing great concern to this community. And ultimately it was shut down. A forensic audit was done on the facility. We've yet to see that forensic audit in all its entirety, but they have said that there has been a misappropriation of funds that has occurred at the site. We do know that. And as a result, it was shut down just over a month ago now. Now we're hearing that we have a remote site here at Galt Gardens that is now taking over, and it's our understanding that we have former employees of Arches that are running this service out of Galt Gardens. And it's unacceptable. In my former career as a paramedic, I spent 21 years here in the province dealing with addictions as a frontline healthcare worker. And I can tell you, once again, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the road that we've chosen, this path that we've chosen to treat addictions is nothing more than just an enabling measure. And I've contested throughout time, and anyone that'll listen to me and my past experiences, that addicts have two endpoints. They have death as an ultimate endpoint for them, or they have a place where they get scared to a place where they understand that they need to seek out sobriety.
The University of Lethbridge held a virtual open house today, showing potential students and their families a glimpse of everything the university has to offer. This year, due to COVID-19 restrictions on in-person gatherings, everything was available online. All of the U of L's faculties and schools were represented at open house through virtual booths. As well, a virtual campus tour gave attendees the chance to see all the campus highlights from the comfort of their own home.
Today we had our first ever virtual open house from 10 to 1. We had a ton of different presentations across faculties and staff that students could sit in on. We had chances to actually talk to professors one-on-one in professor Zoom booths. We also had perks if you applied today, so you did get a free pair of socks if you applied, as well as if you checked in, you actually will get a Shine open house pack in the mail after open house. So it's a little different this year, but we were really excited about being able to have students come through this online open house and check out all the opportunities at the University of Lethbridge.
A new survey in Alberta shows that COVID-19 is causing people more stress, anxiety, and depression. The study examined different age groups in a Canadian cohort during the COVID-19 pandemic who subscribed to the Text for Hope program for Albertans. One author of the study, Vincent Agyapong, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Alberta, has previously focused on lingering mental health effects of public traumas such as the Fort McMurray wildfire. Provincial and private agencies approached him and his colleagues to help design a public mental health response to COVID-19. Although the 6,000 respondents were a small sample size for the population, Agyapong says it may be indicative of something larger going on. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is backing an international project to make and share vaccines for COVID-19 with a contribution of $440 million. Half of that is to support countries that couldn't afford to buy vaccines for themselves, and half is to secure 15 million doses for Canada.
This pandemic can't be solved by any one country alone, because to eliminate the virus anywhere, we need to eliminate it everywhere. That's why Canada is helping ensure vaccines are distributed quickly and fairly around the world by supporting Gavi's COVAX facility and advanced market commitment. Our government will invest an additional $440 million for the COVAX facility to provide doses around the world for Canadians and for people in developing countries. Up to $220 million of this investment will go directly towards securing doses for Canadians. This means this agreement will give us the option to purchase up to 15 million doses for Canadians.
Supporting other countries in their fight against COVID-19 and other infectious diseases reflects our Canadian values of helping those in need, both in Canada and internationally, and it is an investment in helping to bridge us back to normalcy. The COVAX facility offers the largest actively managed portfolio of vaccines candidates globally. It includes 9 candidates so far, with potentially more to come. The vaccines that Canada anticipates receiving via the COVAX facility are in addition to the doses that we will obtain through the arrangements already executed between Canada and vaccine developers. By supporting COVAX, we are continuing to diversify our investment in potential supply, and we are committing to assist low-income countries. With these announcements today, our government now has secured access to a total of 12 vaccine candidates so far, which will ensure that once these vaccines are proven to be safe and effective, Canadians will be able to receive them.
Bars and restaurants must shut down earlier, and all strip clubs in Ontario will be closed, Premier Doug Ford said Friday, as the province attempts to stop a recent surge in COVID-19 rates. Ford said the week-to-week increase in virus rates is concerning, and new rules need to be implemented to reduce transmission in high-risk businesses.
Earlier today, we announced further restrictions to stop the spread of COVID-19. Effective today at midnight, all bars and restaurants will be only permitted to remain open until midnight. All adult entertainment clubs will be closed right across the province. All businesses and organizations will be required to implement screening procedures for their workers. And tomorrow, going forward, restaurant and bars must stop serving alcohol at 11 p.m. and close their establishments by midnight, except takeout service or delivery.
Recapping one of our top news stories, an unsanctioned drug injection site opened in our city Friday night. Set up just 3 weeks after the province pulled funding for Arches. The pop-up site is being run by the newly formed Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society. And a look at weekend weather. It definitely feels like fall with these colder evening temperatures. Tonight, partly cloudy with a west wind and chilly low of 5. And for Sunday, expect sunshine with a west wind gusting from 30 to 50 and a high of 17 degrees. According to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, 160,000 jobs have been lost in Alberta so far this year. Coming up, Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf stops by our studio to offer an update as to how the UCP will get more Albertans working again. That interview is next, but first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Lethbridge Sport Council's Outdoor Roving Gyms program is taking place Mondays and Wednesdays from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. behind Nicholas Sharon Arena. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving gyms. Something new to anime fans. Every weekend, Nikayuko Japanese Garden is hosting an Anime Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Watch videos on anime creation in the pavilion and learn fun trivia about your favorite anime characters. For more information, visit nikayuko.com. Bring your lunch and enjoy beautiful live music at the same time. Come out October 2nd to the First Friday Lunch and Listen concert series featuring performances by the University of Lethbridge Conservatory of Music in Cass's Community Room beginning 12:15 p.m. and ending at 1. First Friday events are an initiative brought to you by the Heart of Our City Committee. For a full listing of upcoming events, visit firstfridaylethbridge.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
A recent call by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is for the Alberta government to rein in spending and no new taxes. Now, the group says Albertans are still hurting financially. A recent report says 160,000 Albertans have lost their jobs since February, and more small businesses are at risk of shutting down permanently during the COVID-19 pandemic. To discuss this in more detail and what's happening with the UCP government is Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here, Hal.
Nathan, let's talk about 160,000 jobs lost since February. What's the province doing to get Albertans working again?
Well, that's the basis for our $10 billion, record-setting $10 billion investment in infrastructure. We know that infrastructure is the work that puts people to work. We want to invest strategically, and some of that is in agriculture, in Lethbridge. The Exhibition Park started that, Highway 320, and those projects are really going to help that industry grow.
What can we really do to help this become an agriculture hub for the entire province, or maybe even for Canada?
Well, it already is, but we need to get that message out there. So one of the things that I've been working on with ministers up in Edmonton is to do a trade mission out of Lethbridge to really support our agricultural industry, not just our ag products, but also the food processing products and our seed. Our seed now can grow some of the greatest crops in the world, and we're highly recognized for that.
Now, the province has a $24.2 billion deficit this year. How is the government planning on getting the spending under control and try to get back to black with our books?
That's
and it's tough during a pandemic,
right?
It's
a really tough challenge, right? We know you can't dig your way out of a hole. We need to develop and get our economy back. You can't tax something that's not there. So that's job number one. We've got to build our economy back, got to get people back to work, and then we can look at additional measures going forward.
Some people talking about a provincial sales tax, potentially maybe an HST, 8% from the province, 5% federally, but you say there's a bit of a danger with that, and why is that?
I think there really is a danger. We don't know what the federal government's going to do with their tax rate. They've spent $300 billion in counting, and if they adjust the GST from 5% to 8 or 9 or 10%, to add a provincial sales tax on top of that could be really damaging. So one is there's other jurisdictional taxes to be aware of. Two is we need people to get back on their feet and then see what we can do. There might be some tax reform that we can discuss in the future, understanding that provincial sales tax might be more efficient, but it's not a silver bullet. And we want to make sure that we protect those who are on fixed incomes. I'm really aware of seniors in Lethbridge as a retirement town. Any tax rate increase really impacts them. Their income doesn't necessarily go up. So I want to make sure that we do that in a very measured way, if we do that at all.
As a born and raised Albertan, I always loved the Alberta advantage, and that means no provincial sales tax. We've just had the GST, so what would make us any different from any other province? What have you heard from your constituents? Are they actually open to an HST or a PST here in the province?
I think there's a bit of a spectrum for people's response to that. I think there is an understanding that it is a very efficient tax as opposed to other ways of taxation, so that there is a debate that needs to be had about that. But again, it's not the silver bullet. If you add that level of taxation, you may have to do other things that you take back to protect other segments of our population, like I've mentioned. So it's not going to just make billions and billions of dollars for us. A 1% tax could bring in provincially about $1 billion. So even a 5% tax would be $5 billion, which is a long way from the $24 billion deficit.
Will the UCP government potentially hold a referendum asking Albertans if they want to see a provincial sales tax?
Our Premier and our party is committed to that. If there was any kind of taxation, like a provincial sales tax, that would go to referendum, yes.
Okay, let's talk about back to school now, education. It's been on a lot of people's minds. A lot of parents and teachers are quite concerned about sending their kids back to school during the pandemic. Last report, more than 16 schools across the province have some either students or staff infected with COVID-19. Many people are saying we opened up too soon. What are your thoughts?
I don't think we opened up too soon. There is lots of speculation all over the map of what to do, and sometimes you need to just start and see what you can learn. Dr. Dina Hinshaw has been working with the Minister of Education all the way through this process. I know our two superintendents, Dr. Cheryl Gilmore and Ken Sampson, have done a tremendous job meeting almost every day since schools were closed in March to come up with a plan. And sometimes you just need to start and see how it's worked. Many of those schools, the transmission is not at the school. It was outside of that, at home in the community somewhere else. And they've done a great job. The process is working. It's identified those cases early. It's put in the measures to protect others immediately. And we need to get things back to normal. And they're very, very, very low risk to students in transmission.
Let's talk about the recent anti-mask rally, or I guess freedom rally that they had at Henderson Lake Park here in Lethbridge. Over 100 people got together. They were angry at the municipal bylaw, the face covering bylaw. They say they weren't consulted. There was no, referendum here in the city about that in that regard. What are your thoughts about some of these face covering bylaws in Calgary, Edmonton, and now here in Lethbridge?
I'm actually quite concerned about them. I understand that you need to wear masks where you can't social distance, and I think it behooves us to respect others and take care of them. But what a bylaw doesn't do is it doesn't allow for differentiation to those who can't wear a mask for a medical reason or a condition that would prevent them from doing so, or for those hard of hearing and deaf. It really impacts their ability to go about their lives normally. And when you're unable to police that, with bylaw officers, then what you really open the door to is vigilantism, where citizens are accosting other citizens for not wearing a mask without finding the story behind that. Our police officers, our bylaw officers are trained to help those situations, to ask questions, and I think we run a lot of risk of turning citizen against citizen, and that's one of my primary concerns.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a backlog of surgeries. Many surgeries have been canceled. What's the province doing to try and help Albertans get back on track in that regard?
We really want to open up surgical suites that are there, make sure that we get those elective surgeries back online. We're beginning to do that now that we have measures in place to limit COVID. And then we're also looking at additional private surgical suites to really get those people through the line. And we have some opportunities here in Lethbridge that we're also trying to work with that can really help serve the people's needs.
How can you really put people's fears at ease that Jason Kenney and the UCP is not turning this into a two-tiered health system, similar to the United States?
Sure, and it's not similar to the United States at all. I've done a lot of research. There's somewhere around 133 public delivered healthcare systems around the world. Almost all of them have some component of private pay. Even the United Kingdom's health service has that and has since inception. So actually we're looking at a model more like the UK, more of a European style model. But the biggest thing to remember is all of these services are still publicly funded. And that's the difference. Doctors have always been private practitioners, so they get paid, but they get paid with public dollars. And I think that's what people need to remember and put their minds at ease, that we're trying to get them access to service to some of the highest quality doctors in the world right here in Alberta.
Many doctors are not happy with Health Minister Tyler Chandler right now. How can we keep our doctors happy and keep them here in the province?
I think it's about ongoing discussion, and this is hard. And it's not simple. I know that there's been different things floated, different ideas floated out there. Why don't we just reduce the fee by 5%? But it's a real tough balance. It's not just the percent of the fee, it's also the volume of patients. If you're a private contractor any in the world doing anything, construction, and you have to charge less per hour for a job, well, you just do more jobs. That's the same situation that the province faces here with doctors. And we have to limit the volume as well as the fee. And that's a tough conversation, and I really respect the doctors in Lethbridge for the services they provide. And not all doctors provide the same kind of service. Some are there 24/7. And that's a different fee model than those who are doing something by volume. So there's a lot of nuance and specialties that need to be addressed in that model.
Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole recently met with Quebec Premier Francois Legault, and they talked pipelines, and obviously Energy East is off the table. Premier Jason Kenney said it's been off the table since 2017 with the Liberals. Nathan, let me ask you something. Do you think we'll ever see a west to east pipeline in our country?
Well, I hope so. I really do. I think last winter when we had the rail lines go down, we really realized the need for that pipeline, that consistent access, as well as it's the most environmentally protecting kind of way to transport bitumen. And a lot of times we hear people saying, well, we need that refinery in Alberta. That would actually result in us needing more pipelines, because then every different type of gasoline, diesel, and other byproducts would have to be separated out.
You can't send them all down the same pipeline.
We can't send them on down their own one pipe. So yeah, it's a big challenge.
What's the plan moving forward in 2021? Because southwestern Alberta is big in agriculture, but how can we really support our farmers here down in Lethbridge?
Our farmers here are world-renowned. We've already done some $10 million of investment into our irrigation system, and we're looking at doing more. And I just want people to know, I didn't really know this until just recently, that 70% of irrigated land in Canada is right here in southern Alberta. We are a world leader in terms of market production and irrigation and land access. Again, we just need to get that message out. We've got some great corporate sponsors that have come here for that. As we continue to develop that, do the Highway 3 twinning, add to irrigation, add to that infrastructure, that will just increase our ability to get that to market. And like I said, I'm working with the Minister of Innovation and Trade to try to get a trade mission going.
Let's talk about the opioid crisis. It hasn't gone away even though COVID-19 is here right now, Nathan. The province yanked the funding for Arches and the supervised consumption site. Now the province has implemented a mobile SES by the soup kitchen here in Lethbridge. But some people are saying that's not enough. We need more Intox, Detox beds to really help the most vulnerable, those who are struggling with drug addiction. Your thoughts?
Well, we have addressed that, taking it from a one-pillared approach to a multi-pillared approach, and we've done exactly that. Intox and Detox is being worked on right now here in Lethbridge, and we've committed $10 million to 2 recovery sites in southern Alberta, one here in Lethbridge and one in the Blood Tribe. That's going to increase access to 125 beds for treatment and recovery, because at the end of the day, we don't want to just stop people from dying, we want them to return to living.
Now, earlier this year, we heard from Minister Schweitzer talking about the plans for a drug court in our city. Why don't you explain to our viewers exactly how a drug court works and why it's necessary? When can we expect one to open here in Lethbridge?
I don't have an exact time for you. It has been delayed because of COVID, so they're working on that. And basically what it does is it seeks to divert those individuals who aren't really hardened criminals away from the criminal justice system to something that will address their needs. If they're stealing to pay for an addiction, we need to help address the addiction before we can stop the stealing. That's what drug courts are meant to do, and be creative with that. And Lethbridge has got a really great opportunity.
Schweitzer's now the Innovation Minister. Casey Madu is the new Justice Minister, our province's first Black Justice Minister, which is pretty cool. Now, with the cabinet shuffle, do you foresee less attention brought to rural crime and a deeper focus on municipal policing?
No, I think rural crime is still very, very important to many Albertans. So that will continue to be something that we work on. There will be an additional focus to municipal policing and how we work with municipalities as we rebuild from COVID and the recovery efforts there.
Now, many of our viewers have asked, why do we actually need a provincial police force? The RCMP is doing a great job. You know, it's been around forever. What are your thoughts? Because I know Kenny's pushing for that.
For
provincial
sure.
Police force.
And it is very distinct that the RCMP hold a lot more prestige and heritage and tradition for those who dwell in major centers and cities. But out in the rural areas, it's a very different story. And it's not, again, it's not with the individuals that are the RCMP officers. It's the ability to resource. It's the administrative support, which comes from Ottawa, not from Alberta. So to really address the needs of someone who lives in a rural community that is probably a half hour away from the detachment, possibly an hour away from a police officer, that response is not as great and is not as good as they need, which is why we've seen some of these farmers taking efforts to defend their lives in their own hands, which is again, is not what we want. We want to support them. So that's why we're looking at it so seriously.
Nathan, a recent poll by Angus Reid says Albertans are frustrated with Ottawa and are considering separation. I think the number is close to 8 or 9% now, getting close to 10 points. What do you say to those Albertans who want to leave Confederation? They've had enough.
Yeah, and I want them to hear very, very clearly that we hear their frustration, we hear their concerns, but really economically, the best place for Alberta is within Canada. We need that trade. If you go back to Quebec, when they talked separation, they saw their house prices drop by 50% overnight. We can't add that on top of everything that else is going on right now. We know it's frustrating. We're trying to address those issues. We're trying to put forward really clear objectives for Alberta to be strong within Confederation. I think that we're on track to make that voice heard, and we want to work within Canada right now.
We've talked about COVID-19, the opioid crisis, attracting more business to our city. Moving forward into 2021, it's hard to believe that the year's almost over now. Many people want to put 2020 behind us, right, with all the challenges we have. What do you see are the major issues here in our city moving forward that we need to address?
Well, I think we just need to understand that we all need to live and learn and work together. We do. We have a spectrum of people that don't even want to admit that COVID-19 is a pandemic, and we have those that are very, very concerned about their livelihoods and their lives. We need to work together. We need to work with respect for one another. We need to get people back to work so we can rebuild our economy, because we're starting to see a huge spike in mental health challenges, suicides, as we've noted in Southern
Anxiety,
Alberta.
depression going through the roof.
Exactly. So those are very, very concerning. We need to get people back to work safely and with respect for wherever people are on that spectrum.
Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome, Al. Thank you.
There's been a lot of contention surrounding the mask bylaw that came into effect several weeks ago, and we've been seeing some anti-mask rallies around town, including one that filed into City Hall during the council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and another one on Mayor McGrath Boulevard. Joining us by Skype to speak more on the subject is Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman. Mayor Spearman, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here, Jeanette.
Awesome. So with all the mask contention, I think part of the problem is perhaps some people felt that it was done so late in the game, and now that there isn't as many COVID cases in town, they're probably asking why a bylaw now. So what do you tell these people that are so upset?
Well, the numbers are up and down every week. We were anticipating and preparing for a second wave. The last thing we want is to have businesses and our community locked down again. So the idea of the mask bylaw, it's one of a suite of things we should be doing, like physical distancing, washing our hands on a regular basis, using hand sanitizer, making sure that we're taking all the precautions. And we thought a mask bylaw would be helpful in the city. What we want to do is protect the people who have immune deficiencies and seniors, of course. And we also want to make sure that people can go into our businesses safely and not risk spreading COVID amongst the population. So the purpose is to protect people from the spread of COVID and to keep our businesses open and our economy running.
Yeah, 100%. Have there been any fines that have been given out so far that have been dished out?
No, there haven't.
There have not?
Nope. The purpose is education,
Okay.
And we want to make sure we want the community to work together. You know, there'll never be a bylaw passed that has 100% support. People say that it's against their democratic rights, but your democratic rights really extend to the next person. So you can't be jeopardizing the physical health of somebody else. So That's the limit to your democratic rights. And so we're simply asking people to cooperate. And we believe that our community will be better off for it if we can get through when other provinces, other communities are experiencing a second wave. If we can keep our economy open, that'll be tremendous.
Yeah, 100%. So speaking to that, if things get worse and more people are contentious about it, would the city start looking to begin handing out those $100 fines?
We're really going to not emphasize the fine side. I think people want us to go out and start imposing fines because some people aren't wearing masks. That's the last thing we're going to do. Is create reactions. We want people to cooperate and think about their neighbors, and let's have a city that looks after each other.
So will the city be looking at extending the face covering bylaw beyond December?
Definitely. What we will be doing is re-examining the bylaw after December 31st. So it's a temporary bylaw. It expires on December 31st, and the bylaw will be reviewed at the first city council meeting following December 31st.
Okay, then something to look forward to for the new year then, I guess. Okay, so we were talking about a second wave, preparing for that. With school starting up again, that's a possibility that could be a trigger for it as well. So there were teachers and parents that had concerns. So Mayor Spearman, do you agree with the decision to reopen schools in September? Do you think that it was too soon, in your personal opinion?
Well, it's not really my responsibility. The decision to open schools was between the school divisions and the Minister of Education. The province decided to open schools, and of course, they provided all the circumstances under which schools can operate. And I know our school boards and school divisions have really been working hard to make sure that our schools were ready for kids to return to. And they've created various protocols that are really building specific and school specific to make sure kids are safe. So if kids can be returned to school safely, learning in person is the best form of learning. I think there's a lot of parents who are very concerned about kids having to learn at home on video systems and questioning the quality of that learning. So how long can we do that? It's better if kids are in school, in a classroom with a teacher, and if we can do that safely, I'm all for it.
Now, at Chinook High School, they are considering an outbreak right now where there's 2 or more cases. It's considered an outbreak. Do you agree with how the school has handled this situation?
I would. I'm not going to second guess decisions that are made at the school. I believe that they are the experts in providing education and looking after their students.
So, Mayor Spearman, you sit on the Police Commission, which was recently criticized by the Police Association for upholding a decision to suspend an officer without pay. I think the argument here was that people should be considered innocent until proven guilty, and that in the case with LPS, no cop has ever been suspended without pay until they've been proven guilty. So why did the commission decide to go ahead with suspending an officer without pay?
Many people don't understand the role of the police commission, and specifically even of city council as it relates to policing. So we cannot direct the police. All we can do in the case is take a look at whether it's reasonable that the police chief recommended a certain course of action, and if it's reasonable, we're not there to adjudicate the case. That case will be adjudicated later by another body. So we're simply saying, was this handled appropriately? And in this case, I hesitate to discuss this much because it is an HR matter and a matter that could ultimately go before the courts. But the police commission is not the adjudicator. We just simply say, were all the right processes followed under Section 45 of the Police Act by the police chief? That's all that's required.
Keeping on the topic of law enforcement, we recently had another drug house shut down by a scan unit. So are we getting ahead of the drug crisis in our city, or do we still have a long way to go?
A difficult question for me to answer. I'm not sure. At any one time, we do rely on the police, the data, but my gut feeling is that the drug problem really hasn't gone away. The reports from the police to City Council indicate that there are at least 200 hardcore users that have mental health issues, a huge challenge for them to deal with, and additional people. So the closing of the supervised consumption site didn't mean that people left the city. It just meant that they're spreading out. So we're getting reports of issues in other areas like golf gardens and in community parks elsewhere. That's where people have gravitated to in order to use their drugs. So people are still addicted. People haven't gone into recovery and detox or intox. So that's a huge challenge for us, and we're still trying to deal with that problem.
Yes. Now, the province says that it's going to set up a drug treatment court in Lethbridge soon, and I know that council had the opportunity to hear a woman come down and talk about it. Can you explain why a drug treatment court would be a good idea?
The idea is to give people who are convicted of crimes, either drug use or drug-related crimes, an opportunity to go into recovery. So they're given a choice of either going to jail or going into recovery. And it's a very rigorous process. If an individual chooses to go into recovery, they're monitored all the time. They can't use that as an excuse to avoid jail. They have to be genuine about drying out, about going into treatment, going into recovery, and through that whole period, they are monitored. So it's an alternative. If it works, it means that fewer people will be using drugs and fewer people will be depending on crime to pay for their drugs.
Yeah. Now, Chris, can you give us an update on the Intox detox beds in Lethbridge, what the situation there is?
The number of detox beds has not changed, so we still have 8 beds at the regional hospital. And we've recently created 30 Intox beds at the homeless shelter. So that means that the police or any of the services can take people to the Intox, and if they're under the influence, they can be cared for, and hopefully people can talk to them, they can access services, and ultimately we want to move those people into treatment and recovery when those services are available.
Wonderful. Let's switch gears again and talk about business and investment. What is the city doing right now to lure more business and investment our way?
Well, we have economic development Lethbridge. City funds that with $800,000 a year to attract businesses to the community, to encourage businesses in the community to grow and expand. And we also have Tech Connect, which is operated by EDL, which helps foster startup businesses. So those are the 3 components that we've funded for some time. City Council will be bringing forward a suite of 6 incentive programs to our next City Council meeting, and that City Council meeting in 2 weeks will look at these different incentive programs, and hopefully we'll approve some that will encourage additional investment in the city of Lethbridge and help us cope with post-COVID-19 recovery.
Are there new initiatives from the city as we work towards reconciliation?
Well, we are making sure that we try to engage with our Indigenous people. We want to begin a relationship with our Indigenous neighbors, the Blood Tribe Council and other groups. We want to see how we can work together on many of these problems. They have the same problems that we have here in the city of Lethbridge when it comes to housing, when it comes to drug addiction, when it comes to crime. And if we can work together, maybe we can have greater success.
Now, we all know that 2020 has been a crazy and unprecedented year. What do you foresee being the biggest challenges for the city moving forward into 2021?
Well, I do think we need to make sure our economy is strong. We need to talk positively about our city. We have a beautiful city. We have many positive things happening in our city. And all too often, the negativism is dominant. We need to say Lethbridge is a great city in which to live and work, and there's great opportunities here. And we all need to be talking positively about how our various organizations and employers and everything we do is great for people that live here. We want to talk about our quality of life. So those are things, hopefully we can turn the corner on some of our social issues, some of the crime issues, and begin speaking more positively about the city of Lethbridge and how great it is to live here.
And with that, it looks like we are out of time. Mayor Chris Bierman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeanette. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to talking to you again next month.
Many Albertans, including our very own Premier Jason Kenney, are not happy with how much our province gives out in equalization payments each and every year. To talk more about it, more detail, is Ben Eisen. Ben is a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute and is co-author of the report, Equalization and Stabilization Post-Recession, Is Canada Ready? Ben, welcome to BCN.
Thanks so much.
So Ben, can you briefly explain how equalization really works and its purpose?
It's a relatively straightforward program. There's some complexities in the details, but big picture, it's relatively straightforward. What happens is the federal government collects tax revenue just from people all across, people and businesses all across the country, and it goes into the general revenue. And one of the things that they use that money for is the equalization program. And the equalization program is pretty simple. What it does is it takes federal revenue and it sends it, just pretty much direct cash payments, to lower income provinces in the country, to provinces that are deemed to be less able to provide quality public services to their residents without higher levels of taxation. So it's pretty straightforward. The federal government figures out through a formula which the lower income provinces are and sends their government some money.
You know, Alberta's been forking out billions upon billions of dollars each and every year. Premier Kenney's talked about how much Quebec has received, Ontario has received. Alberta sometimes has received the short end of the stick. Will our province be receiving some of that money back as we're still trying to recover from a pre-COVID-19 recession?
No, Alberta will not receive any equalization payments now or the foreseeable future. The reason for that is that Alberta still, despite all of the terrible economic hardship, still has higher average incomes than people in most other parts of the country, than in any other province, actually. So the way that equalization works, Alberta can't become eligible. But what's interesting is that Alberta has also not been eligible for very significant payments under the stabilization program. That's a cousin of the equalization program designed to help provinces, even if they're higher income like Alberta, that have taken a hard hit. And quirks of the program, that one, have meant that it really has provided very little help for Alberta during this very difficult time. So if you sort of think of the two together, equalization and its less known friend, the stabilization program, you can say that they haven't served Alberta well and that Alberta's received very little money out of either program.
Ben, should Alberta have received some payments perhaps during the oil collapse in 2014?
Well, Alberta did receive at that time some stabilization payments, but they're just a drop in the bucket in terms of how small. There's an arbitrary cap on the amount. It's $60 per person. The reasons for that cap are sort of silly. They're rooted in an event that happened in the lumber industry in British Columbia in the 1980s. It's ad hoc and arbitrary, and it's not well designed or thought through. So Alberta did receive a small amount of money through stabilization back then, but the amount was not determined by a sensible formula. If you want to have a stabilization program that's designed to help governments deal with it when there's serious shocks to the economy, such as occurred in Alberta in 2014-15, and such is happening again today, then that program needs a fundamental rethink, because right now it's designed so that it can do no more but deliver a drop in the bucket to help a province like Alberta when it's going through a shock like it is today.
Do you think we will ever have a referendum here in Alberta on equalization, Ben? And if so, would the federal Liberals even listen or take notice?
Well, the Premier says that there will be a referendum. Premier Kenney says there will be a referendum. The Fair Deal panel, which the government struck, recommended a referendum on equalization. So the signs do look like it will happen. I can't quite guess how other governments will respond. It is a federal government program, so it becomes a little bit hard to know exactly what that will look like, what the negotiations would be, what the role of other provinces would be, in a little bit of uncharted territory with one province having a referendum on a specific federal program. But there could be movement in terms of its role in the Constitution, and perhaps one theory holds that the whole purpose of this is to start a broader conversation, not just about equalization, but about fiscal transfers generally, about the thick network of programs by which the federal government collects a lot of money and sends it to the various provinces. And that goes beyond equalization. And so maybe a referendum could trigger a rethink on a lot of those things, and then perhaps something good would come of it.
What kind of percentage do you think we would see of Albertans saying that, you know what, we shouldn't dish out so many billions of dollars each and every year through equalization? 80 to 90% of Albertans?
I won't speculate because I try and steer clear of public opinion and political guessing about political outcomes. But I'll say this, and for Alberta, equalization is a large federal program. It's about a $20 billion a year program, and it's a program from which Albertans receive no direct benefit. So the fact that it's unpopular in Alberta only makes perfect sense. And for taxpayers elsewhere, residents elsewhere in the country who struggle or who wonder why equalization is such a point of friction and tension, I think it's worth taking a moment to think about federal programs that such a large federal program that existed, let's say, that delivered no benefit whatsoever to Ontario. Would we expect it to be popular in Ontario or Quebec? If there was a big federal program as big as $20 billion that delivered no direct benefits to Quebec, would we expect that program to be popular there? No. So the equalization's lack of popularity in Alberta makes perfect sense to me, and it is, in fact, in my view, entirely predictable.
You know, the equalization payments as well here in Alberta have given rise to the Wexit Party, the separatist party here in Alberta. You know, people are saying we should take our money and run. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a political outcome in and of itself. But there are huge advantages to being part of a larger, diversified country, particularly going through difficult times such as now that we can see. And there's also there would certainly be a lot of political uncertainty, economic uncertainty from investors wondering, hey, what would something like that look like? And there's a lot of good evidence that political uncertainty is bad for the economy. It hurts growth. And things of that nature. So I think there'd be a lot to worry about in terms of the effect on political stability, investors thinking, hey, what's this going to really look like? And we saw that. We saw that happen in Quebec a lot of during the separatist movement. A lot of businesses and capital fled out of Montreal. And so it's something to keep in mind that there can be damage caused by the uncertainty that these things can create.
Now, Ben, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about the current equalization program. Provinces receive payments based on their fiscal capacity, but how else does it work?
Well, the fiscal capacity calculation is quite complicated. What that means is it evaluates each province's ability. Let's say they all have the same tax rates. If you would generate more money, you have higher fiscal capacity. If you have less money, you have lower fiscal capacity. But it also calculates. It also includes natural resource revenue, approximately 50%. It's 50%. The formula is a little quirky and not worth getting into, but for the sake of simplicity, natural resource revenue also feeds into that. And that's problematic in terms of the incentives that it creates, because in have-not provinces, Quebec, Manitoba, there's been disincentives towards the actual generation of natural resource revenue because people respond to incentives. When they see their receipts of those revenues go up, equalization goes down almost commensurately. So certainly it's very important when we're looking at equalization and its related programs to take a hard look at what are the incentives that this is creating, and is it creating incentives for growth? Is it creating incentives for national cohesion? Or is it creating incentives for different kinds of public policy and frankly serving to create tension? And when the program is creating tension rather than unity, I'd go so far as to say that it's really failing to achieve one of its key purposes, which should be to bring Canadians together.
Why do you think Ottawa would come up with like Bill C-69, preventing a lot of oil pipelines and regulations on our energy sector when you need that money to help support equalization payments? It's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, the expression goes.
And that, I think, is a major source of frustration in Alberta, that there's a sense, and not just a sense, there has been real challenges to the creation of energy infrastructure in the province that have been created by policymaking in other parts of the country. And that is a huge source of frustration. Albertans, like people in any other province in the country, want to prosper. They want to be able to make use of the natural resources they have. They want to be able to get global prices for their resources rather than something less, which is what happens when you have a lack of pipeline access. So I think on that point, and certainly all of Canada benefits from a prosperous Alberta. As you say, it contributes more to equalization payments, not just equalization, though. It contributes more per person to all federal programming when Alberta's thriving and people are making high incomes and paying high income taxes. All of Canada benefits from a strong Alberta. And in fact, Canada is badly weakened by a weak Alberta. And so certainly a frustration surrounding laws that made the development of energy infrastructure impossible for so long. I think frustration surrounding that is entirely reasonable.
You know, Ben, an oil tanker carrying Alberta crude just completed a 1-month journey through the Panama Canal because there was no pipeline from BC to the East Coast, you know, to carry that Alberta crude. That was a 12,000-kilometer trek. Ben, many agree this is simply ridiculous. Will we eventually see a pipeline from the west to the East Coast so people can use Alberta oil?
Well, I don't know what we will see, but I will, because I try not to make predictions, but I will say this, the case for moving oil through pipelines is very strong, even particularly if we want to focus on the environmental effects. There's very strong evidence that if you move oil through pipelines, you're much less likely to create environmental damages at the local level than if you move it all the other ways that you can move it. You move it by rail. You just mentioned a long voyage of a ship. Something can go wrong, can easily go wrong there. But certainly the evidence is crystal clear that pipelines are a much safer way to move oil across the country than oil by rail, which is the #1 replacement when pipelines don't exist or are inadequate. So from an environmental perspective, there's a very good reason to be supportive to the development of good, high-quality energy infrastructure, including pipelines in Alberta, if the market can bear it.
Stats Canada says the Canadian economy has shrank by 8% over the first few months of 2020 because of the COVID-19 virus. Now, in your opinion, how long will it take for the economy to really bounce back?
Oh, I wish I knew. It's going to be a challenge. There's going to be a partial. With the reopening, there will be a strong uptick. People go from no economic activity to some economic activity. But it's not going to drive you all the way back to where you started in terms of undoing all of the economic damage. There's still big challenges in terms of getting people to work safely, making sure that people have safe places to put their kids so that they can go and do their jobs. I don't know how long it will take Canada to get out of this, to really get going again economically, get back to the place where it was before all this. I can't make a prediction on that front, but I can say it's not going to. I don't think it's going to be a really fast process because we haven't solved all the problems that we need to solve to get a recovery going full speed ahead.
Now, due to the changes in our economy, Ben, do you think maybe some of the current programs, the federal programs, are actually working?
They're achieving some of their goals while creating other obstacles. You think about a program like the CERB program, which is replacing income that's been lost for people, and that has certainly achieved certain goals, some very important goals in terms of bridging people through hardship, helping families that otherwise would have been in terrible circumstances and perhaps faced insolvency. So it's certainly achieved some of its very important objectives. But now we're reaching a point where, as you mentioned, the issue of recovery has come about, and there's now real questions about incentives for people to return to work. If people can make almost the exact same amount of money on CERB as they would going to work a 30 or 40-hour week, it's entirely logical that they might prefer not to do that and protect their health better, stay inside, all kinds of good reasons. That's not to suggest that people making those decisions are in any way lazy or gaming the system. It's that people respond rationally to incentives. And if we have a long period of time where we pay people not to work, there might be a very good reason for that during a crisis. I think there was a good reason for that during the crisis. But as long as you have it, it's going to be an obstacle to getting full employment again, and it's going to be an obstacle to getting the kind of full speed ahead recovery that we would all like Canada to have eventually, and once it's safe.
So maybe some policy changes that would improve the situation, such as maybe phasing out the CERB payments?
It's going to have to be. I think it's going to have to be phased out eventually. It can't go on like this permanently. It's extremely expensive, and we're already seeing deficits pile up at the federal level, over $300 billion. The provinces themselves are facing fiscal challenges. My view is that CERB is going to have to be unwound eventually. Unwinding it won't be easy, especially if the economy hasn't fully recovered. There's always going to be concern. You don't want a situation in which you're creating terrible economic hardship for Canadians. So you want to be sensitive to the challenges of the COVID recession while recognizing that if you pay people not to work as much as they would to work indefinitely, you're going to have labor market problems. So I don't envy any of the people making these decisions. They're hard choices. They're difficult policy changes. But the programs that have been implemented, the CERB program, the CEWS, the wage subsidy, they're simply, in my view, not sustainable in the long run. And the governments need to be thinking now about how they're going to unwind them, because I'll tell you, it's not going to be an easy trick.
You know, you touched on that. You're right. The deficit is $343 billion. The debt's approaching $1.2 trillion. So, and I mean, this is money that we have to pay back eventually. Ben, how much will the new NAFTA or the USMCA really help our economy get back on track?
It certainly is better than if there were lots of new protectionism. There was sort of concern of that a few years back, that fundamentally there might be fundamental changes in the Canada-U.S. trade relationship. That doesn't seem to have come to pass, and that's good news. Freer trade between Canada and the United States has generally helped the economy and been good. That said, in the short term, we have barriers between our two countries that would have been unimaginable a year ago, in terms of not having people being able to flow back and forth between the two places, disruption of commerce and supply chains. So free trade between Canada and the United States is great. It won't be able to have its full positive effects until we're able to open up borders again and let people go back and forth. And that's not probably going to happen until the virus is under control in both countries, which is potentially some ways away.
Ben Eisen, Senior Fellow from the Fraser Institute, thanks for joining me today from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.